Mike Grell, welcome to Word Balloon. It's great to see you, and I really appreciate you doing this interview. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Well, congratulations on this project. I'm very excited. I'm a longtime reader of your stuff, going back to your Legion of Superhero days at least, and Green Arrow. I take that back because Green Arrow was after that, but also, of course, Sable, and really excited about the Sable omnibus. Tell me about the project. What are your ambitions with this?
Well, first of all, thanks, man, and thanks for buying me all that food. You can tell I put it to good use over the years. Yeah, the Sable omnibus is really exciting for me. We've published a few editions with comic mix and IDW over the years, but never a hardcover, and never with high quality glossy paper. We're doing it's going to be a deluxe oversized edition, similar to what DC does, 8.5 by 12 and something or other. Can't remember the exact dimensions, but each one's going to have a new wraparound dust jacket, and there'll be 5 editions, 5 volumes in all.
Wow.
And we'll have things like a companion volume that will include the letter column that was one of the more entertaining letter columns in the history of comics, especially the one where the young lady wrote in complaining about a scene that I had drawn Sable in the shower, and I strategically covered up certain body parts, and she was disappointed and let us know it in certain terms.
I understand, man.
Yeah, it was pretty funny. Yeah, we've had some great stuff. Mike Gold, of course, was instrumental in all of that. In fact, he was the instigator of so many really cool things. He'll be writing the foreword to it. He also offered to write a backward and a sideward if I needed it. So I'm going to take him up on the backward for sure. I don't know how we would manage the sideward. But yeah, each volume is going to have in the area of 400 pages. Volume 1 will include issues 1 through 13.
Okay.
And we're also going back in and remastering some of this stuff. I've got a whiz working with me, Glenn Hallman, who's come up with some interesting tweaks that we can do to enhance the color a bit and increase the resolution on some of the books. That there's a few things were a little on the spotty side, and he's shown me some interesting examples, and I think it'll be just a Jim dandy when it's all finished up.
That sounds great, man. I'm really excited for it, and I loved Sable. I think I was the right age for Sable, and because it was around getting the year again when did Sable debut? 80, 81?
80. It actually started in I started at 82, but it came out in 83.
Okay, all right, that makes more sense. Yeah,
I started production.
Okay,
well, production 82. Yeah,
gotcha. I was sorry, don't mean to age us both, but I was I was in either, I guess, 83. I was a senior in high school, and I grew up in Wilmette, and you guys at first, weren't you in Evanston, Illinois?
Yes.
I don't know how often you were there.
Mike Gold was in Evanston at the time, and I was living in Wisconsin, northern Wisconsin, my hometown, Florence, 100 miles north of Green Bay.
Wow.
Yeah, population about the equivalent of a really small high school.
Sure.
like the we had well, when I was a kid, we probably had about 1,200 people in town, maybe a little bit less. Now it's down to about less than 500.
Wow.
Yeah, home of the newlyweds and nearly deads.
I understand.
Just
I had years in sports radio, and so I went to a lot of Green Bay games back in the day, and that's about as far north as I
lucky
went
you.
in Wisconsin. I'd go to Michigan. I'd skip the rest of the state, go to Michigan and everything. So I feel bad that I missed your territory.
I've only been to two Packer games in my life. Once when I was much younger, and went there to drink beer and do the tailgate party,
Oh yeah,
and yeah, and watch the Packers lose horribly. And then just a couple of years ago, uh, Dave Powers from Powers Comics in Green Bay volunteered his season tickets
wow,
for a game, and yeah, and I brought my buddy John Anderson out from Washington State. John's the world's biggest Packer fan, and we went to the game and just had a complete ball.
great. That's awesome, man. No, I was working in sports radio, and I got to say, like, the Lambeau Field press box was notorious for its quality of food, and
Oh yeah,
I'm in the big and tall store with you, man. I we took full advantage of that. It was really great. It was a lot of fun going to Packer games back in the day. But I want regarding Sable, I think I was the right age because I still love a good superhero story, but I just love how even back then, genres were really being explored beyond superheroes, sci-fi, and what you were doing. I mean, I always thought of it in the same vein as like Men's Adventure, things like the old Executioner
right.
books and Nick Carter and things like that.
Yep. Very much so. The timing for me was just exactly right. I had gotten away from superheroes as much as possible. I was tired of drawing muscle bound guys in skin tight suits, and in fact, it took me about 6 months to learn not to draw Sable muscle bound.
Interesting.
And yeah, I mean, I had to really seriously work at it, and kept thinking to myself, no, the guy's, he's 5'10", and he doesn't weigh 220 pounds. He weighs like 175, something like that, 180.
Sure.
And had to seriously work and concentrate on getting his physique down to where he could wear normal clothes. And the story wise, once again, I was blessed by my association with Mike Gold, who's the editor there at First Comics. Um, Gold called me up. I had broken away from DC to do Star Slayer over at Pacific Comics, and that didn't work out very well. We got 6 issues out before they tanked. But Gold called me up and he said, "Look, we've got a company we're starting up here in Chicago, Chicago area, and come over and work with us. We'll give you carte blanche.
Wow.
Do whatever you want, right?" And so the first thing on my mind was I wanted to do a book that would be the subject matter that I was really interested in, and giving me the opportunity to do the kinds of stories I wanted to read, and with the kinds of settings and themes that would bring out the best in my artwork. Something that would encourage me to do my absolute best work. And so I came up with Sable, the idea of an African hunter in the concrete jungle. Africa had always been a passion for me. Even when I was a kid, I wanted to be Tarzan when I grew up. Turns out the job was already taken, and even in the movies, you had to be over 6 feet tall. It's like I came close. I only missed it by about 8 inches.
I have a process page of when you drew Tarzan that I bought over the years from some art gallery,
Ah,
and
yeah.
I'm glad I have that. I also mention, and we might talk a little superheroes later, but I have a Green Arrow that you did for me in Rosemont 15 years ago at least, and then also you did a Barry Allen Flash for me just a profile, the headshot.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah.
I got them both framed and everything, and they're on my walls right now. But among my favorite art commission pieces, absolutely, Mike, you definitely delivered on those pieces. So I thank
No,
you for
that's
that.
great. I
Absolutely, man.
appreciate that. I appreciate that.
And you
Yeah.
mentioned,
So
I was going to say about Sable, if I may, real fast. Because well, no, you finish the story, and then I'll ask your questions.
I was
Please.
just going to say, so when it came time to do the story,
Mhm.
I had a lot of this stuck away in the back of my brain already, and I that's where I first started drawing on current events. The
Yeah,
the once I got past the origin story, I was able to look around at the world and say, what's going on here? Let's do a story about that. And because Mike Gold always had my back and continued to when I went back over to DC to do the Green Arrow series,
sure.
Longbow Hunters. I had his complete confidence, which says a hell of a lot. And I just took it and ran with it. I began doing experimental stuff with the artwork, techniques that hadn't been done before. From issue number 19 on, almost the entire series was reproduced from pencils,
Wow.
which took a bit of developing. I started off working on frosted mylar, which takes a really clean, crisp line with a pencil. But then, even then at that point, we were working from the crappy plastic plates that everybody was using for
Sure.
printing in the day. But now with digital, there's some amazing stuff that can be done, and we're taking full advantage of that with the omnibus.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah,
Are you,
going back and remastering some of those pages.
have you tried working on a tablet yourself, Mike, or are you still doing it old school?
Yeah, there's I know everybody's going to digital these days, but I'm strictly an analog guy.
That's cool.
Um, yeah, I if I had to throw away every other thing in my studio and keep one utensil, it would be a pencil. There's nothing that I can't do with a pencil. In fact, when I did try to do digital, tried to render something digital, um, it worked sort of, but it took me 3 days to produce a drawing that I could have done in 30 minutes with a pencil.
Interesting. Sure.
And yeah, and at the end of the day, what have I got? I've got an image that's locked in a computer, and that computer, it has long since gone down the road. These things wear out from time to time,
100%.
and yeah, things get lost along the way. Where if I had just sat down and done it with a pencil, I'd have a piece that I can hang on my wall.
You've done
So
interesting
yeah,
things when if
I do
go
go
ahead.
back in and I do go back in and use Photoshop now to render over the pencil drawing to make it blacker, sharper,
Okay.
crisper, so you have a better reproduction. But that's all.
Gotcha. When you did your flash for me, you used I remember seeing you use pencil shaving, and you would take your finger and kind of make
Oh
like a
yeah,
background, which I loved. And know that so I get what you're saying. And it's funny, I before he passed away, I had a conversation with Gene Colan years ago, and he basically told me the same thing. I really feel like you two guys really evolved your style with pencil specifically in ways that others haven't.
well, if you stay the same, if you don't grow and evolve as an artist, you stagnate.
Sure.
And the sound that you'll hear coming up behind you is the next young hotshot who's about to trample you into the dirt. You've got to keep moving. You got to keep moving. I don't draw the same today as I did 2 years ago. I
Great.
don't draw this. Yeah, I don't draw the same in the 2000s as I did in the 60s and 70s and 80s and and on.
Sure.
I started off with a great desire to be the next Al Cap, and that didn't pan out so well. And then when I got reintroduced to comics by a buddy who showed up in Saigon with about a dozen copies of his favorite books. In there was Green Lantern, Green Arrow. So I took one look, and man, with Denny's stories and Neil and Dick on the art, comics had grown up and changed so dramatically. I knew that that was the kind of work that I wanted to do stylistically. And then when I began Sable, I had another artistic epiphany, which was between if you take a look at the cover for issue number 1 and issue number 2, it's like night and day. And what happened in between those, even though they were only drawn about 6 weeks apart, I bought 2 books. One was called The Magic Pen of Joseph Clement Cole, Coll, who was a turn of the century artist who illustrated books like King Solomon's Mines and a lot of Conan Doyle stuff, right?
Wow.
And he had this great linear textured quality where he could give you a full range of tones in his illustrations just by varying the texture that he was drawing with. And the other book that I bought was called The Pencil by a guy by the name of Paul Calley, who did with a pencil what Cole did with a pen. And that's where I got the brilliant harebrained idea to start working all in pencil. And I just love it so much that I stuck with it. So over the years, and I think as an artist, you may fall into a situation where you're expected to draw a certain way because your style has become popular, you become recognized for that. But probably deep down in your heart, most artists would want to continue to evolve and grow over the years. I read a book. I won't give the artist's name, but it was published. A fantasy artist who this book was published somewhere in the early 80s and no late 70s, and in it he said, art no longer holds any mystery for me because I have mastered every aspect of it. And whoa, I have to say that if you look at his artwork today, it's exactly the same as it was back then. Hasn't changed or grown or anything because he no longer feels the need to. In some cases, folks come to expect a certain thing from you, but on the other hand, there's always going to be that little thing that you're holding back. I think most artists would be frustrated to be locked into something like that.
100%, man. Absolutely. About the character of Sable, as you say, and it's very spelled out in his origin and flashbacks in the series as well. He's an African hunter. He's a white man hunter, but he hunts in Africa and then really becomes, as you say, an urban hunter. So yeah, I mean, as opposed to hitman or mercenary, I mean, he was a detective. He was Jon Sable freelance. I mean, that's the title and everything. And we know he was
Right.
I loved his children's author persona by day that paid the bills, much to his chagrin. But tell me about the difference, or how you see him. Do you see him as a mercenary? How do you define Sable?
Sable is a guy with a lot of tragedy in his past. He had fallen in love with a girl from Africa, followed her home, and started a new life there. Had a couple of kids and trying to hold body and soul together, working as a professional hunter and later becoming a game warden. And when ivory poachers attack his ranch while he's off on a job, his family is killed, and he goes off his nut and tracks these guys down and slaughters them in the most horrific, horrible way you could imagine.
Yep.
But then the problem is, if all you have left to live for is vengeance, what do you do when your vengeance is done?
Yep.
In Sable's case, he becomes a hopeless drunk, winds up getting thrown out of the country, deported back to America, and falls into a gutter until an old friend picks him up, sets him back on his feet, and he begins a new career as a children's author, writing a series of books about leprechauns living in a fairy mound in Central Park. But he writes under a pen name. It's not by day the mild-mannered children's author, by night the dark avenger. But it's the only time he uses a disguise of any kind is when he has to go out in public, book signings, conventions, or whatever you want to say, and make a personal appearance, because he doesn't want his hairy-knuckled buddies down at the guys club to know that he's got this softer, gentler side, right? And so he puts on a Harpo Marx wig, fake mustache, nerd glasses, and a tweed jacket, and goes under the name of B.B. Flemm, F-L-E-M-M, which when it's written out, it's not so bad, but when you say it, it's like, okay, right? That kind of stuff. And he's making so much money at this, he sure doesn't want to give it up. But his driving force, how he becomes a freelance, is that he's a guy with a death wish. He is very much looking for somebody to pull the trigger on him. He is reluctant to admit that he's found another reason to live. He carries horrible guilt over the death of his family, that he wasn't there when they died. He would much rather have died with them than to live without them. And that follows through. The level of bloodshed and violence in general that occurred in that comic series was pretty intense. Yep. But the interesting thing is I never got any criticism for violence against humans. But when I went on safari in Africa and I wrote a little backup feature called Safari Sketchbook, the idea that I had actually shot an animal, people were unhinged. I mean, they were just absolutely up in arms that I would actually shoot an animal. You got to remember, I grew up in northern Wisconsin in an area that was ranked in the Kennedy administration, which was when I was in high school.
Okay.
They did a ranking of the 10 most depressed areas in the United States. And there were actually 12 places on the list because there were two ties. And my hometown was tied for first with Appalachia.
Wow.
Yeah. If your dad didn't hunt, the family didn't eat meat.
Sure.
That's all there was to it. My mom hunted. Everybody in the family hunted and still does. I skipped this year because of the COVID, one of those things.
I understand.
But, but I'll be back next year. And one of the proudest moments I can remember as a kid was the year I got a buck and nobody else did. And the idea that I had fed my family for the winter on that deer was, wow, to me, that was just like the ultimate. So sort of a bar mitzvah, even though I'm Italian, right? So the 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 crux of the character with Sable is, number one, that he has this death wish, and number two, I wanted to keep him as real as possible, to the extent that my guys, when they get shot in one issue, they're not all better and healed in the next issue.
Yep.
You know, everything has cause and effect. Decisions you make have ramifications that may not come back to you now, but sooner or later they will. And from time to time, I've planted a lot of stuff that um, it took, in some cases, years to get around to. Like, for instance, when I did the Warlord, when I was drawing the very first issue, I had a scene where Travis Morgan gives Tara his wristwatch, and she puts it on her arm like a bangle. And as I was drawing that panel, I figured out how I was going to end the series, how Morgan was going to die, who was going to kill him, and why, and what role that wristwatch played in it. It took me 35 years to get around to it. It's like, I mentioned before that I'm Italian. It's not quite the level of Michael Corleone, but he only had to wait until Mama was dead to get his revenge, right?
That's right.
I had to wait for Carmine Infantino.
Do you want to explain that, or is that a?
No, it's an ongoing joke. Carmine had promised me a full year's run on the Warlord when I started it at DC.
Okay.
And when I went in to read the proofs for issue number 3, I turned the pages, the lettered pages, and come to the last page, and it says the end.
Oh no!
And
Oh,
yeah,
no,
and Joe, I'm in Joe Orlando's office, and I said, "This is wrong. It's supposed to say next issue and then the title." And he says, "Yeah, Carmine canceled." I said, "He can't do that. He promised me a year's run." And Joe goes, "He lied. He does that."
Oh,
Fortunately, very shortly thereafter, Jeanette Kahn walked in and canceled Carmine. And the first thing that she did was looked over the publication list and said, "Where's the Warlord?"
oh, that's
And
great.
yeah, and turns out it was her favorite title. And they said, "Well, Carmine canceled it." And she said, "Carmine's not here anymore. Put it back." And
And then,
she did.
and how many
Yeah.
issues did you end up doing in the original run? And
A
also,
bunch.
well, yeah, and that's true because you left midway through, right? Didn't Fleischer take over the
Yeah.
writing after a while?
Yep.
Mike Fleischer,
And
yeah.
and it passed through a few hands and saw various resurrections
Oh
over
yeah.
the years. I think we had a release in just about every decade.
Wow.
Yeah, just about every decade.
Well, and I remember the last one, and the torch gets passed to Travis's son,
Yes.
which
Yeah.
is I a longtime fan of Warlord, Mike. Absolutely, I love the
Thank you.
series.
I appreciate that.
Oh, absolutely. When they came out with and I don't know how you felt about it, but those DC showcase, I know the paper wasn't great and they were black and white, but to me, it was just great seeing Warlord again, and especially issues of yours. And man, you just really again just the world building you did with Skartaris and everything, and then just that idea of this entire just classic sci-fi of this secret world inside the earth and everything. And I loved it. I love the original concept and your designs. It
I was
really,
always a
you know.
I was always a huge fan of Edgar Rice Burroughs and the way he would craft his stories and create an entire world, civilizations, sheer imagination. At that time, specifically, I had just finished reading a book called The Hollow Earth, and when I pitched the concept to DC. Actually, I had already done a comic strip, 6 Sunday pages, 2 weeks worth of dailies, and a whole concept that was in my bag when I went out to try to crack into the business, expecting that the newspaper strips would, they'd welcome me with open arms. No, not at all. Couldn't even get an appointment to show my stuff.
Wow.
But as a result, I wound up showing it at the New York Comic Con. And as I turned away from Saul Harrison's table, there was an older gentleman, and by older I mean a guy who was like 20 years younger than I am right now. Really creaky old fart. Was standing there, and he asked to see it. And when he looked at it, he told me in no uncertain terms to get my carcass up to Julie Schwartz's office and show it to him. And I asked if I could have his name so I could tell him who sent me. And he just says, "Tell him Irv sent you." Turned out to be Irv Novick, who was the Batman artist at the time.
Wow.
So yeah.
Yeah.
So that was the door kicker for me. And the same sort of idea that I started with the Warlord was very much in my mind when I did Sable, to reveal things slowly, rather than just jump in. Standard comic book storytelling is, page 1, you introduce the hero. Page 2, you introduce his family. Page 3, the family gets killed. And from then on, he just runs amok and slaughters everybody. The end. And I took time to build up the story to reveal what his family life was like, what his home life was like, what his relationship with his wife and kids was like. And then I killed him off. And it had a much more powerful emotional effect that way, because the audience got used to it. There's a couple of issues that I did. It took me over 2 years to get Sable in bed with the future love of his life, although I introduced her right off the bat, a lady by the name of Myke Blackman. And I took 2 years to get them in bed together. And then, of course, all bets are off, from that point on. I was always doing my best to push the envelope, and it's probably the only time I ever got censored for my artwork. And I didn't discover it until the book was printed. I had a scene where they're in bed together and they're nude. And when I opened the book, it looks like they're wrapped up in a sleeping bag or something like that, or a garbage bag, one of the two. And it turned out that First Comics had just had a serious conflict with their printer. They were using an outfit that prints lots of heavy duty Christian stuff, like the Watchtower magazine and stuff like that. And the old ladies on the press line had a conniption over American flag that had just come down the presses, and so they insisted on that change, and I was really upset. But it is what it is.
I hear you, man. You really did it. All your romance scenes, I think, pushed the envelope in good ways, because again, and I did. I just felt like this was an adult comic book, and I mean that in the gentle way of that they're mature stories. And man, the Ollie Dinah relationship you had in Green Arrow, I always thought was incredibly responsible. They were equals, and they were adults that enjoyed sex.
Oh yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
The best laid plans of mice and men. Well, these are the best laid characters in comics, and they always were. I always felt that even the way Denny portrayed their relationship, you knew that they weren't just boyfriend girlfriend; they were lovers, and
yeah.
and that's all there was to it. My whole run on Green Arrow, the through line of that is the love story between Ollie and Dinah. Everything else, basically, it's an excuse. You have the adventures. There's a new adventure every couple of issues, but the thread that carries it on is the relationships, and that's the same thing with Sable.
Yes.
We were talking just a little bit ago, and you mentioned by day the mild-mannered children's author. My initial concept for Sable was that he was going to be the reverse of Batman. Okay, no mask. The battle mask is face paint.
Right.
If you paint marks on your face, and you go down the street, everybody's going to go, "Hi, John." What's
Sure.
with the funny marks, right? That you're not fooling anybody, and also no secret identity, except that he uses a pen name for his children's books, and none of this by day the mild-mannered children's author and by night the dark avenger. So when ABC picked up Sable for a blessedly short-lived TV series in '87,
I remember well.
they reversed my reverse.
Yeah.
And by day the mild-mannered children's author Nikki Fleming, because they didn't think the name Flim, BB Flim, sounded good, and it's like that's the point, guys. It's a joke. It's a joke. And by night the Dark Avenger, Jon Sable, and it was just awful. Reversed my reverse, and made it exactly like Batman, only nowhere near as good. Now,
but Rene Russo, at least in the show.
Yes, Rene Russo made her acting debut, and also Laura Flynn Boyle.
Wow, I didn't know that. I didn't remember that. That's amazing.
Yeah, she was a young girl who got kidnapped in the very first episode.
Wow, hilarious.
But
that's fantastic.
among other things that they did was they did a test market demographic.
Yeah, focus group. Sure.
Yeah, and it ranked number one in the 18 to 35-year-old male audience. So when did they put it on? 8:00 on Saturday night. Guess where your audience is? They're not sitting home watching TV.
Yep.
It was canceled after the second episode aired, or maybe even while it was still on the air. I think the phone rang. There was a network going, "For God's sake, don't make any more of this." But they had to continue and finish out the 6 episodes that they were contracted for, which I felt terrible for the actors involved, because they really gave their all, and they had some really great people in it. Louis Van Bergen, who played Sable, got the call on a Sunday, and on Monday morning he's in Chicago in front of the cameras.
Wow.
And had to jump in and basically create it from whole cloth. But Rene Russo, when I met her, she was so nice. I told her right then and there that I knew she was going to be a big star, even though the series had already been canceled, and because she had that charisma.
Yes.
Anytime she was on the screen, you couldn't take your eyes off her. Not just because she's so beautiful, but because she had that compelling charisma that was just so attractive. And she blushed right down to her toenails and thanked me profusely. I said, "I got nothing to do with it. This is all you. This is all you." And I was right.
Yeah, you were. Absolutely, man.
Yeah.
And
so
is that on DVD anywhere?
I'm sure you can find a bootleg on eBay.
Okay.
I have not received 1 penny in royalties for it and the residuals ever, even though it's aired in every English-speaking country and a lot of non-English speaking countries, and they're
Jeez,
somebody's making money off of that, but it sure wasn't me.
That sucks, man. I'm sorry to hear that. No, you're right, and certainly didn't hold a candle to the comic at all, and was very conventional, sadly. Despite that pilot, which I thought was an effective pilot, and then kind of showed him, had the war paint on, had him as the urban hunter, at least the broad strokes as I remember, again 35 years ago. But
Yeah.
that's all right though. We're glad that you're moving forward with the omnibus though. And any thoughts to new Sable stories?
Yes, as a matter of fact, before we wrap this all up, there's going to be another Sable story,
Great.
and yeah, it may be a standalone that will publish separately, but more than likely, it's going to be included in that last omnibus volume.
Okay, that's cool. That's great. I've always been happy when you've come back to the character, and yeah, and again, same thing for Warlord for that matter as well. We mentioned very briefly Green Arrow. What did you want to do with Ollie? Because the timing was great. It was around the time of Dark Knight. It came after Dark Knight Returns. It was the next prestige format series. And I felt that even though it was a different character, you were dealing with Ollie Queen as an older hero.
Yeah, the reason for the older part is because I had a big dispute with Julie Schwartz years ago. There was a line that somebody, I think Elliot Magan, had written for a backup Green Arrow story that I was drawing, and it had something like, "I'm not even 30 yet." Right? Ollie saying, "I'm not even 30 yet," and I went to Julie and said, "That just doesn't work." And Julie said, "No, no, no, none of our heroes are over 30." I went, "Really?" He said, "Yeah, kids can't relate to a person who's over 30 years old." And I said, "Well, how long would you say Speedy and Green Arrow have been together? How long do you think Robin has been with Batman?" I said, "Would you say like 5 years?" And he goes, "Yeah, that's about right." I said, "So, and they were, what would you say, 16 years old now, something like that?" He said, "Yeah, 16, 17 years old." Okay, been together for 5 years, and Ollie is 29 years old. Bruce Wayne is 29 years old. Now, do you honestly think a judge would grant custody of an 11 or 12-year-old to a 25-year-old bachelor? I mean, this is well before Michael Jackson, right?
Yeah. Jeez.
And
You're not wrong.
he thought for a minute. He thought for a minute, and he changed the line of dialogue. And from that point on, I made it my mission in life to make all my heroes older than you would expect. And the key to it all was, in general, I always made them like 1 year older than I was at the time. And with the exception of Travis Morgan, I made him about 15 years older. And the reason behind that is that way I can say to myself, self, if you start working out, lose some of that blubber, a year from now you could be doing this kind of stuff, right? and unlike so many other comic book characters, my characters have birthdays. They all have birthdays, and they get older every year as they go along. So what happened with Green Arrow and the timing of it was that I had left DC to do Star Slayer and Sable. Then when things were falling apart in my relationship with First Comics, I moved on, and I get a phone call one day from Mike Gold, who had also moved on and was now editing over at DC. And he asked me if there was anything in DC's lineup that I liked well enough to bury the hatchet and come back to work over there. And I said, well, I always thought I did such a crappy job on Batman that I'd like to get another shot at it. But just like a week or 10 days before I had dinner with Frank Miller, and Frank told me his idea for the Dark Knight. He just had the bare bones worked out at the time. And I said, when Frank's done with Batman, you can put a period at the end of the Batman sentence for the next 20 years. So far, I'm off by almost 15 years and counting, right? Um, and Mike right away piped up and said, well, what about Green Arrow? I said, Green Arrow has always been my favorite comic book character. Still is my favorite comic book character, hands down. Even among the stuff that I've created, if somebody said, who's your favorite among these, Warlord, Star Slayer, Sable, Maggie the Cat, Bar Sinister, Shaman's Tears, all this other stuff, it'd be Green Arrow. Still my favorite character. And he said, well, think about this. Green Arrow as an urban hunter. And that's all it took. I was hooked. And he knew exactly what he was doing. He carefully baiting the trap. And again, I was given carte blanche to do what I wanted with the character. And so that's what I did. There are a lot of elements familiar to people who read Sable. Again, I was drawing from stories in the news.
Yeah.
Right. Pick up the newspaper, and you can generally find something that will spark some kind of a story. One of my buddies one time said, well, how do you come up with an idea for a story? I said, I didn't have television when I was a kid. I never saw television until I was 8. We didn't get one until I was 11. So, we made up our own stories. We played outside. We listened to the radio, read books, comics, whatever, and, movies. And we learned to use our imagination. I said, what do you do for a living? He said, I'm a produce manager. I said, okay, here's a story for you. The guy who's a produce manager is unpacking produce, fruit that's coming from South America. And in that bundle of fruit, he finds a packet of cocaine. What does he do? Right? Whose cocaine is it?
Yep.
And does he decide to sell it and provide maybe financial whatever for himself and his family, make life easier for him? Or does he turn it in? Well, if he keeps it and tries to sell it, guess what? Sooner or later, the people who own it are going to come after him.
Absolutely.
And then, and that's all you need for a springboard for a story. You can grasp something out of thin air if you have an active imagination. And nobody ever said I don't have an active imagination.
I always felt the pacing in Sable and Green Arrow felt like adventure comic strips. You know what I mean? In terms of the tone and the pacing and everything. And yeah, man, no, you had, Ollie really got into, and especially because of his ne'er-do-well CIA buddy, Eddie Fires, Fries or Friars? Fires, Eddie Fires. Yes, indeed. So yeah, man, we had a superhero comic that got into black ops and wet work and stuff like that, that again, you see in Men's Adventures, which I really intrigued me. And I really felt you were going in directions. Again, give me Superman crashing through the wall, clunking the villains' heads, and untying Lois. It still works for me. I get it. But it was just great to get these alternatives to adventure stories that really were exciting and seemed to be even more based in reality.
Yeah, the pulp type action adventure has always been near and dear to my heart. And I learned a lot about good storytelling by drawing the stories that Denny wrote, and I learned a lot about the structure from reading lots of great old pulp style paperbacks when I was a kid. I had all the Tarzan books, all the Martian series. Just about everything that Jules Verne ever wrote, although wading through 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea was a chore. It's more of a travelogue than anything else, but oh well. but on by the same token, Journey to the Center of the Earth was one of my all-time favorite movies, and I read the
Sure.
book probably 8 times while I was in high school. You know, it's just exciting stuff.
What a visionary! Really, I got to participate on a show that the Science Channel made called Prophets of Science Fiction, and one of the episodes
Ah,
I got to talk about was Jules Verne, and it was great. And yeah, it was just a pleasure reading his stuff. And my God, what a futurist to be in the 19th century and extrapolate the technology of the day and be able to make those fantastic stories. I mean, it really was an achievement. He really was a brilliant man.
yeah, yep.
So yeah, I know I'm stating the obvious. Uh, honestly, Mike, I'm really excited for this omnibus, and it's great. What are you? Do you have any other plans in motion beyond this Kickstarter right now? With any other current
Oh, yeah,
projects?
yes, absolutely. We are, of course, going to be completing the Maggie the Cat story.
Hey,
That
excellent. Sure.
Yeah, that's going to be our next launch. In fact, because Sable is effectively already done; it's complete. The only thing
Okay.
I have to do once our Kickstarter finishes off and our funding comes in is paint the cover and fill in some gaps in the back, you know, with other material. But it'll be stuff that's already existing. I don't have to produce anything in order to get this done, which is
Okay.
why we're going to be able to produce 5 400-page volumes in 2 years.
That's excellent, man.
The last one will be published in time for my 75th birthday, my
Wow.
Diamond Jubilee.
Outstanding, man. That's great.
Yeah,
Maggie the
I
cat,
will. I
great,
will.
great character. Go ahead.
Yeah, Maggie the Cat was just a joy to work on. Um, I've done screenplays for both Maggie and Sable, and over the years we've been really close. I mean, like a gnat's whisker away from a green light on both of them, and something always happened, and I'm at the point where if I hear another version of the check is in the mail, or I have foreign capitalization, money from China. That's a famous one. We got money coming from China. Uh, I'm sure I've got money coming from China too, but that's only because I sold my great aunt's dinner plates or something like that. That's as close as I'll ever see money from China.
I hear you, man.
Um, but we have high hopes that, especially now with the streaming services, looking at everything under the sun.
Totally.
Yeah. So eventually we'll get something on screen.
But on paper, you're going to do a Maggie the Cat new story,
Oh yeah,
or
yeah. The first volume that I published is it's actually the first half of the movie script, and the second half is lots of deep characterization and things like that. You put the two together, plenty of action, and I will be featuring Sable in that second half, just because he may not be in there for very long, but he's definitely going to put in an appearance.
that's cool. Yeah, she came from the Sable series and everything. No, I
Yeah,
remember
yeah,
vividly. Absolutely, that's why as soon as you said it, I'm like, oh my God, that's great. And I hadn't thought about her initially, so that's terrific.
yeah,
And the
yeah.
time is right. People want female protagonists, and Maggie's a terrific main character to follow. I think that's fantastic.
Years ago, when Magnum PI was uh, intended to go off the air, and of course they did what they generally do with a long running series, is that by the time they're finished with it, they have pretty much jumped the shark, right? Um, Tom Selleck, Donald Belisario was interested in another series for Tom Selleck, and so we sent him out a stack of Sable comics. And just like what happened with Pierce Brosnan, Remington Steele, when the word got out that somebody was looking at something else, right away the network snapped them back up again for another year. And that's what happened with Magnum PI, but it was interesting to see that in that early part of that season, Magnum runs into a character that is dead bang copy of Maggie the cat. It's like, thanks a hell of a lot. Thanks a hell of a lot.
Wow.
Yeah. Another one that I didn't get a check. I didn't get a dinner. Non mangiare.
Well, hopefully what you're doing now with Maggie and John, translates into a couple of series. I think both of them absolutely would be great concepts. And as you say, streamers right now, yeah, they're looking for content.
What people don't realize often, or they've forgotten or not paying attention or whatever, the blockbuster movies that put Marvel and DC on the map are all based on stuff that we did 30 years ago, 40 years ago in some cases. And we're always trying to stay ahead of the curve. And as a creator, I mean, that's your job.
Sure.
You have to give people something to think about, something that'll spark their interest and make them go, whoa, wait a minute, what if, maybe that would be something that could work. I did a series called Shaman's Tears, where deals with a group of human animal genetic combinations, and at the time that was sort of leading edge concept, but 30 years later, you've got rabbits that glow in the dark, and they're growing human pig chimeras, fetuses, for the purpose of harvesting organs. And it's just, you have to think not next week, you have to think not next year, you have to think in the next decade, maybe 20, 30 years on down the line. What if?
Understood. Absolutely, man. You did, and any thoughts? You didn't create Green Arrow, but you certainly evolved Green Arrow in your run. Watching him on CW, any thoughts of that show?
Oh, I loved it. I fell so far behind in my viewing because over the last few years, I've spent so much time on the road. Mary and I had fallen into a pattern that involved getting on an airplane on Thursday, doing a show Friday, Saturday, Sunday, fly back on Monday, sleep in on Tuesday, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Do your laundry, pack on Wednesday, get back on an airplane on Thursday.
Wow.
Somebody asked me, where do you live? I've got a place in Wisconsin, but I've been down here with Mary since December. And yeah, she doesn't realize it, but very slowly, every time I go back up there, I bring more of my crap down here. I'm being real sneaky, slowly moving in. No, we're permanent. We're permanent. We're gonna make it official here sometime early in the next year.
Okay.
But we are enjoying the downtime as much as anything else, taking advantage of it. Someone asked me once, where do you live? And I would tell them the airport or the Hyatt. I spend more time there than I spend any place else.
Sure.
But now that everything has changed, I'm going to be a lot more selective about what I do in terms of personal appearances. There will be no more 5 weekends in a row, ever in the history of ever. From now on, that's all there is to it. Time to take a deep breath and limit my appearances, limit our exposure, and maybe folks will be more eager to come and see me.
Absolutely. No, I understand that. And really Since COVID and everything, you guys, I mean, I don't want to get into your business, but are you doing all right? Are you soliciting commissions or anything through your website?
Oh
Or
yes, yeah. If you go to MikeGrell.com, there's a link to my art rep, Scott Kress at CatskillComics.com.
okay,
You can book commissions. Yep, I've stayed busy. One of the things that we found out is that fans, folks, are hungry for stuff.
absolutely, Mike.
We,
Yep.
we discovered that especially with the Sable Kickstarter. I'm just gonna see if I can refresh my screen here. We have
Yeah,
been
give us a
active.
Status.
Yeah, we've been active. I've got it in the sunlight.
It's only been a day or two.
We went active 9 o'clock Eastern yesterday morning.
Yeah.
And we're at 29,396.
Way to go. That's excellent,
right now.
man.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
We're more than halfway to our goal.
Wonderful. That's great to hear. I certainly hope this conversation will lead people as well to the campaign. And
me too, because as we go on, we have some great stuff coming up for when we reach certain levels. There's going to be added bonuses that go into the packages.
Sure.
When I have to say, in all honesty, there is absolutely no limit to how much of your money I'm willing to take. I'm just saying.
It's all right, man. We're glad you're doing this, and glad you're active, and really want to make this happen. And I want to see all 4 volumes of the omnibus, and I want to see the Maggie the Cat series. Excuse me, 5. Pardon me, 5. Even better. And we want to see the Maggie the Cat series too. So
yep, that'll be the very next thing that we tackle for Kickstarter. Will be another Maggie the Cat Kickstarter to fund the production on that, so we can get that up before the end of the year.
That's great, man. Honestly, well, it's been a pleasure reading your stuff these many years, and I'm glad that the Sable stuff is finally getting the treatment it deserves as far as a slick hardcover worthy of the series. And yeah, man, please come back when you're ready with your next campaign. I want to talk to you more. We've barely scratched
John,
the surface.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, we barely scratched the surface in this conversation. Hell, well, next time we got to talk about if you're willing, we'll talk about your days on the Legion of Superheroes as well.
There you go.
So
I've got a million stories, a million of them. Some of them are even true.
There you go. Fantastic, man. Well, congratulations, Mike, and really all the best on this campaign, John, and the subsequent ones. And really, thank you very much for joining me today.
You're welcome. My pleasure. Bye, guys.